portfolio of debt that we will refinance and the savings that we are attempting to garner from the refinancing, we are going to capitalize and build and upgrade the South Coast sewage plant to tertiary level. Okay, fine. But Mr. President, an honorable member mentioned in this morning's debate a key area that I also want to raise in terms of the difference between the two agreements. And that is the issue of the sustainability performance targets. The member noted that in the debt for nature swap, the targets associated with the development of the Marine Spatial Plan, the MSP, were clearly outlined, clearly defined. And that was not by chance, Mr. President, because the targets that were associated with the debt for nature swap was based on a long and rigorous consultation with the Nature Conservancy, the technocrats, the public sector technocrats, and a wide cross-section of stakeholders to ensure that Barbados had the capacity to reach the targets for the Marine Spatial Plan, to ensure that that agreement could be reached. So it was not by happenstance or by chance that those targets were clearly defined. How the government arrived at these sustainability performance targets for this arrangement and this agreement, I don't know. It is not spelled out. Hopefully in the wrap-up we will hear more on this. But sir, it is critical because, as mentioned, there are conditionalities if the targets are not met. So it is imperative that the government articulates those targets in a way that Barbadians can feel comfortable that, one, the targets are achievable and we have the capacity to reach them. That is fair, Mr. President. I believe that that is fair. But sir, you will have Barbadians saying this is not a bread and butter issue. Why put over 240 million Barbados dollars, as I heard in the other place this morning, I'm hearing it's US $150 million. That's 300 million Barbados dollars. I don't know, Mr. President, so I'm going to say it's somewhere between 240 million Barbados dollars to $300 million in savings. That's where I am at, based on both debates in either house. But why go through the trouble of refinancing the debt? Why do this? Why treat wastewater at the level that we want to treat it at, to recharge aquifers, to push it back down in the ground, Mr. President, and then on top of that, give it to farmers for irrigation? Why do this? Because I have bread and butter issues that I want to deal with. I want the government to address. I have community needs that I want addressed. Mr. President, the government is going through this exercise for some key reasons, and there's some facts behind it. The first, and we heard it this morning, Barbados is one of the most water-scarce countries in the world. Not in the region, in the world. That is a fact. Sir, and I believe that the public has become desensitized to that because of our own success in the distribution network. By and large, the north or the east, that's a different conversation. But nonetheless, most Barbadians turn on the tap, water comes out. Water comes out, and nobody has to go in the yard and check the cistern or go to a tank and manage the amount of water we have to ration each day, because in countries that have large issues with water similar to ours, households have to have a cistern, you have to have a tank, and you have to manage that water. So when somebody's in the bath too long and you can literally see your water line go down, you know you have to turn off the tap. We don't have those issues in Barbados to the extent of other countries. So that desensitization makes Barbadians believe, no, they got a lot of water around. But that's not necessarily so, Mr. President. It is not necessarily so. Sir, as we look forward to, in terms of the climate crisis, increasing temperatures will place a significant demand, increased demand on the use for water. Just recently, the World Meteorological Organization said that there's an 80% chance at least one of the next 5 calendar years will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. What that means, that the heat that Barbadians have been feeling is the coolest they will ever feel in their lifetime. I can repeat that. The heat that you are feeling will be the coolest it will be in your lifetime. Because temperatures, global temperatures are set to increase given the amount of global warming that is in the atmosphere. And when you're hot, what do? You bathe 3 and 4 times a day because you're just trying to keep cool. The water, you need water for what? Your plants, animals. Sir, I've been hearing there's the chickens are being affected by heat stress, and Barbadians are up in arms now because they can't. I'm here at sites, Mr. President. There's a low production in chickens. So you can start to see the direct impact of what people think is an esoteric thing that people keep talking about, not realizing it affecting the food in their fridge. So we have to be cognizant as a small island state, Mr. President, that climate change is not something for somebody else to deal with. We have to, yes, advocate on the global stage, but domestically, we have to get our affairs in order. But, Mr. President, I go further. That is on the demand side. It will obviously affect the level of supply. Increased heat means more or less, I should say, water supply going down into the aquifer. It is just that simple. It will decline the supply of water in the coming years. And if the demand is going to increase, but the supply is going to be reduced, then you have a problem. So what do? In addition to that, Mr. President, the rainfall that we are having, as we heard earlier, yes, it is a heavy downpour, it is a lot of water, but it is running off. The aquifers in Barbados say it's 3 months to recharge. 3 months. So if you have a year that, let's say 9 out of 12 do not get the required rainfall, and then a couple of days in the last 3, you get this downpour, every sporadic downpours that runs off. Where's the aquifer getting the water to recharge? We have a problem, Mr. President, and it is not something in the future, but it's something to deal with right now. 80 to 90% of renewable supply of water resources in Barbados, meaning the amount of water that is replenished in the aquifer by the water cycle, is used already. So we are using 80 to 90% of what exists naturally. So if we increase demand, or if the supply goes down, we are in trouble. Mr. President? So this resolution before the House is critical to the survival of Barbados. There's no disputing that because of the issue and how vulnerable our water resources are to the climate crisis. But sir, as good as the policy innovation may be and the resolution before us, and I do agree, the details, there are more details that need to be shared. There are some other issues that I want to ventilate. The first, Mr. President, is the South Coast sewage plant and the Bridgetown sewage plant serves 3%, just 3% of the population. I see some looks like, is that true? based on the data. That's based on the data. 3% of the population. Sir, with this current upgrade and all of the effort that government is putting into this agreement, why haven't we heard how many more Barbadians will be served based on the upgrade to really give it value for money for Barbadians? So you're moving from 3% to 5% of the population, 10% of the population? What is the level of increase in terms of service this upgrade will bring to the population of Barbados? Mr. President, in addition to that, if we are moving to tertiary level treatment, let us know, in addition to that, how it is going to augment the water supply. That is the type of debate that I want to have around this resolution, Mr. President, because if we are not clear on how it directly impacts people or how it directly impacts the water supply in real numbers and in real terms, then we're getting lost in translation as we discuss this resolution, Mr. President. The second thing I want to raise is which institution will manage the operations of this upgraded treatment plant? We have a service provider, Mr. President, the Barbados Water Authority, that by all accounts, I will say they're trying their best, but overstretched, dealing with just the day-to-day operations of water provisioning. We can all see it across Barbados. Burst pipes can't get fixed. You call them 2 and 3 times, nobody don't answer the phone, and you hear the barrage of complaints, Mr. President. In addition to operational challenges that the Barbados Water Authority seems to have, administratively, they also seem to have bottlenecks and challenges. Because to date, you can't get any updated, audited financial statements out of the service provider. So if the day-to-day management of water resources has the service provider stretched, then who is dealing with this brand new spanking tertiary level treatment plant on the South Coast to ensure that the savings that are supposed to be upward to 300 million Barbados dollars is well spent and managed? That is a question, Mr. President, because we construct it, we get the savings, and we go into construction, and we break ground, and we go on CBC, and we shake hands, and we are well on our way. Mission transformation. But after the construction, there needs to be management, and somebody needs to operate it and maintain it. And that is where we fall down all the time. Maintenance, Mr. President. But I go even further. The honorable member who led the debate, and I agree with him, this plant is not a 5-year, 10-year project. It is for 30 years. Who is overseeing the long-term planning of wastewater in Barbados? Given the facts that I stated earlier as it relates to the climate crisis and water resources, there has to be some type of long-term plan. I heard mention of a master plan, a 30-year master plan, but who then is dealing and managing and overseeing and enforcing that plan? Those are the questions that we have to ask and get right. Because on the front end, we have the savings and we're going to make the upgrade, and that is fantastic. Fantastic. But it is the operationalizing of these things, Mr. President, and the technical capacity to do it. Especially when things start to go wrong, how do we pull back? Where are the guardrails? How do we ensure that we stay on the right course? And it becomes even more curious because a committee was mentioned earlier in the debate. I believe it was a Water Resilience Committee that the Honorable Senator mentioned earlier. We passed an act in this chamber last year. Water Reuse Act 2023 was proclaimed the 5th of June 2023, Mr. President. That act makes provision for a committee as well, a wastewater committee. Is the Water Resilience Committee and the Wastewater Committee the same people, or is it a subcommittee of who is responsible for the long-term planning? Because when you have too many people responsible for something, everybody passes the baton and nobody becomes accountable. Nobody becomes accountable, sir. Because, no, it's not our committee that deals with that. It's the other committee. The other committee said, no, that's not our mandate. That's not our remit. It's the other committee. So the question has to be, is the Water Resilience Committee and the Wastewater Committee that is legislated under the Water Reuse Act part and parcel of the same committee, or the separate committees? And then who has the final responsibility for the long-term planning of wastewater in Barbados? Mr. President, and I say that because I want to really talk about the water sector in Barbados this afternoon. And I know people weren't expecting me to speak on this aspect of it, but it is something that is critical to this debate. So the last time we had an integrated water resource management policy in Barbados, listen carefully, which is best practice, an integrated water resource management policy was in 2008. Since then, we've had zoning policies, groundwater policies, but nothing that encapsulates the entire water sector and how it is to be managed along with wastewater. We put it in the PDP, the Physical Development Plan. We passed the water zoning, bits and pieces along the way. We made amendments to the Barbados Water Authority Act. And all of those pieces are supposed to come together and culminate into a sound management strategy for the water sector. But something is going wrong, Mr. President, in putting those pieces together. You want to know why? In 2020, we had a water protection and land use zoning policy that is supposed to address all of the issues that occur in the water sector. Yet, when you compare it to the integrated water resource management policy for Jamaica or even Trinidad, who update regularly on a 5-year basis, I believe it is, and I stand corrected as that, but they do regular updates to their water policy, we are playing catch up. We are playing catch up, and we are playing catch up with pieces of policies that we're trying to put together to make a comprehensive whole. And maybe, Mr. President, that is a symptom of, and I hope you allow me to use this word, the water sector has been treated like a bastard child. 1 minute is in the Ministry of Agriculture, the next minute is in the Ministry of Energy, then we put it in Transport and Works. Nope, bring it over to the Prime Minister's office. Well, I'm hearing elevated now, sir. But the point remains, when you have a sector as critical as the one that we are talking about today, that the government has put significant effort into restructuring or refinancing debt, we have to take the water sector serious. And we cannot leave it to the service provider to be the person responsible or the institution responsible for policy. We can't do it, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of order. I am loath to. The Honourable Senator is misleading the House and perhaps attempting to use information that is accurate and interpreting it inaccurately. The fact that the Prime Minister herself has taken responsibility for the water sector and no longer leaving it to line ministries is in itself making the point that the Honourable Senator is making, that it is to be treated and elevated as a point of importance that requires the leadership of a Prime Minister herself because it has been left wanting for some time. I think we've asked and answered your point.
Mr. President, I understand today is a... You didn't...
Please continue.
Yes, sorry, good. Yes. Mr. President, no, seriously. The idea of not having a central department within government that oversees policy planning and policy development of water and wastewater in Barbados will be to our detriment. Will be to our detriment. Because as I said, there's no accountability. Where does the accountability lie when things go wrong? But, Mr. President, I don't want to get into certain things right now, so I will ignore the asides and continue. I say that, Mr. President, on the backdrop of something that's also very curious and peculiar in the water sector, and that is regulation and oversight. Sir, we are upgrading the South Coast sewage plant. We have a Fair Trading Commission based on Utilities Regulation Act that is supposed to regulate service providers. What role does the FTC play in service delivery of wastewater in Barbados? Because there's no mention of it in the Water Reuse Act. The Water Reuse Act states the minister may make regulations to the standards of the treatment to be applied in relation to reclaimed water for sale or other supply to persons. So, is it the minister? You hold on. Is it the minister or is it the Fair Trading Commission? Don't worry, I'm coming to that now. Because the standards of treatment to be applied, Mr. President, suggests that you are establishing service standards. But yet, the Fair Trading Commission published a report 2 years ago, in 2022, in relation to the service standards for the water sector. So is it that we have a set of legislative framing that both the minister and the FTC are fighting for territory? As it relates to service standards in water and wastewater? I don't know. I'm asking the question. I am just reading the legislation, I'm reading the policy documents, and I'm seeing all of these inconsistencies that allows for this sector to have the types of issues that it has. Because we have, and I promise I will not go here in detail, we have people in St. Lucie who are unclear of the process or the procedure by which they seek recourse for poor service delivery of the product by a utility in Barbados. Mr. President, I also want to state that in addition to service standards, there's some inconsistency with who sets the rate as well. Mr. President, under the FTC, the Utilities Regulation Act, it states that it has the authority in Section 3, subsection 1. The functions of the Commission under this Act are, in relation to service providers, as I said, 9D says, Determine the standards of service applicable. 9E, monitor the standards of service applied to insurance compliance. That, I would assume, falls into those folks who live in St. Lucie. I have served family that live in St. Lucie, and I'll say no, they're not happy. They are not happy with the level of service coming from the Barbados Water Authority, right? But under the legislation, the FTC is the regulator and the institution that is supposed to be dealing with these matters. And that is on top of what I call a meter fiasco, that no one seems to understand what is happening, where 1 month you can live in a house with 3 people, 4 people. Your water bill is about $80, give or take. It has been for the last 12 months. And then up comes your water bill, $25,000. And somebody asks you if you have a leak. That happened in my house. How are we dealing with these issues as it relates to consumer relationship and the poor service that consumers encounter, and who is the entity responsible for taking up these matters, Mr. President? That is what I want to ask. And then it goes on, sir, in the Utilities Regulation Act, it says that the FTC should also carry out periodic reviews of the rates and principles for setting rates of standards of service. Yet, Mr. President, in the water sector, who sets the rates? Who sets the rates for water? The minister. It is the minister. So, for me, I applaud and I understand when we move in the right direction as it relates to becoming innovative in policy development. But there are structural and sectoral issues that, unless we address those, the value proposition coming out of this project, Mr. President, is at risk. It is at risk. Because, as you just noted, Ms. President, I have 3 minutes, but I want to articulate this point now. When this plant is set up and it is operating, who is carrying the burden of costs for operation? Who is carrying the burden of costs for the operations? Because the plant is not going to be set up and it doesn't cost us anything to run on a monthly basis. So where on the balance sheet does that lie? And where are the funds going to come from to supplement that cost? Because at the moment, Barbadians are paying a garbage and sewage levy, and that isn't covering the cost. And they already complain about it. So what then is the revenue mechanism that the government is going to put in place in order to cover the cost of the plant when it is upgraded? Because at the moment, it is not a tertiary level plant. So that means there is more machinery, equipment, technical assistance, personnel dealing with the South Coast Sewage Plant once it is up and operational. And that is why I say, Mr. President, I ask the question, who is responsible for wastewater policy development and long-term planning? Because we are going about a significant refinancing exercise. It is a fantastic opportunity for us. However, we have to get more serious as it relates to policy and planning in relation to water and wastewater in Barbados. And I believe that Barbadians deserve better in terms of the level of debate that we talk about, given that the existing issues that they have. Because to come and tell us we have a shiny new plant down on the South Coast means nothing to the people that still get in brown water, Mr. President, have issues with their meters. They don't know who to turn to in relation to recourse. But the government is 10 steps ahead. Meet us back here sometimes. We want y'all to come back. Deal with the structural issues as it relates to the operation, the legislative framework, and the policy development for the water sector in Barbados. Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Drakes. Speaker, Senator Walters.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to give a brief contribution to this important debate. I am happy that Senator Dr. Drakes came before me and gave a lot of clarity to some of the underlying issues that are prevailing when it comes to water and sewage in the country. Mr. President, there was a heated debate this morning when the opposition rose to respond to the resolution before us. Spirited debate. And I want to support a lot of what was said this morning. When a bank approves a loan, it is because they have been furnished with sufficient information to make that determination on if they should pursue the opportunity or not. None of us can walk into the bank or any financial institution and walk out with any sum of money without first substantiating what it is for, how much it is, and the ability to repay. So in other words, there is a plan of some sort that has been prepared and put on the table. Just we don't know where the plan is. Mr. President, what bothered me as I drove down to this debate, as I got into my vehicle and my radio automatically turned on, I heard the Minister of Finance speaking about issues surrounding this resolution. Minutes before this honorable chamber is set to have a discussion on approving the debt to climate swap and to talk about sewage issues, etc. He is on the radio. I did not hear a lot because it's just a short drive here. But he is on the radio giving information around this debate that this chamber does not have access to. Mr. President, how are we called to make decisions, to vote for, against, have educational debates, inform the public, raise issues, and we do not have any information? The document that was made a document of the House today, we have not seen it until this morning. It has not been emailed to us prior. It is not even on the website of Parliament. We have no information. We are left to listen and write quick notes when Senator Blackman gave his presentation. We are left to take pieces of what happened in the other place to make an important decision as this, like this. And then Senator Blackman would say that Barbados is a model of governance. No, Mr. President, I disagree. I disagree. But where is the respect to this chamber that the minister can withhold information as relates to the dealings of this transaction, but is on public radio even before a decision is taken in this House on the resolution? Where is the respect to the chamber and the members of this House? Mr. President, the Honorable Senator Charles Blackman, well, I guess some people that you're a cricket fan, they would say he had a long run up because he focused in his over an hour and about 15-minute submission very little on the resolution before us. Yes, I agree with you when you corrected Senator Rowe that he did list some of the things that are in the resolution and so forth. We spent very little time to explain to Barbados what this means. He spent a lot of time talking about the sewage on the streets and how it affected tourism. Facts. I'm not disputing that it was not on the streets. 3 years of flowing on the streets affecting tourism. Between 2016 and 2018, those 3 years, we had 1.9 million stayover visitors in Barbados. In the last 3 years of this government, after COVID, they have 1.6 million visitors in Barbados. So they have a perfect pitch. I can't get the ball played. Those are the facts now. But I'm not here to defend. I'm not here to defend. I'm here to share facts. So, talking about the minister swimming and all this thing, we had more tourists coming to this country with sewage in the street than this government had without. I'm not saying we should have sewage in the street, Mr. President, but I'm just showing you that the government has a long way to go in getting back to some of the industries and some of the things that we had going in this country before they came to office. Mr. President, I'm not doubting the figures, Barbados Statistical Service. But what we are clear of here, Mr. President, is something that the government has kind of played around in this conversation very, very smartly. But what is clear today is that the taxpayers of Barbados will have another loan on the books, on the balance sheet. Because the resolution speaks to $600 million. But as was repeatedly said, the savings will go towards another loan that will be taken out for the capital project that has to be undertaken for the sewage project.
Mr. President,
And what do you raise?
I raise on a point of order. I want to ensure that the public is not misled because this loan and the savings are not going to service any other loan. The savings are going to service different things and different infrastructures to build out the capacity of the country. And the nature of what we're debating today, a loan or swap, it means we're not incurring no new debt at all. I want to make that clear. I've listened and I've enjoyed some of the things that the honorable member has said, but I had to intervene to correct that mistruth. Don't fall down the line of your other colleague. No, you're going well. Talk, but don't mislead people.
Thank you, Senator Lovett. Senator Walters, in my listening, the indication was that the savings would finance the plant, not to go to any loan for the plant.
Okay. Mr. President, allow me to quote the minister in his presentation in the other house. That is very in sync with what Senator Chad Blackman said as well. Yes, I can quote. Yes, I verified. Allow me, sir, and I quote. But of course, sir, we cannot wait 15 to 20 years, sir, to build to upgrade a plant. Because the plant needs financing to be able to be upgraded, and therefore we have entered into an arrangement, sir, where the savings from this particular transaction that we will see over the course of 20 years, these savings will approximate to roughly $150 million US, sir, and therefore, if you accept, sir, over that period of time, we borrow the money up front, sir, to build the plant and related infrastructure, and use the savings to pay off the capital loan that we are going to incur from the IDB and GCF in part. So while the resolution before us today may not convert to a debt increase, the savings that are going to be derived from the transaction will allow us to service a new loan that will be on the books of the balance sheet. So we have established that today, Mr. President.
Just to be clear,
Yeah.
I understand, I tell you what you're saying.
Yes.
An old loan is being swapped up for a new loan, which is a separate thing from saying that in addition to that, there'll be a loan to separately finance a social plan.
Mr. President, your assistant, Senator Blackman.
No, I'm only assisting the facts. I'm
are you
not here.
understand clearly?
I'm not here to assist anyone, Senator Walters.
I am saying to you, sir, that the facts here say that out of this transaction.
Here's it. Understand this, Senator Walters.
Sorry.
You're free to make your own interpretation of points, interpretation of facts. I'm just saying, if you're going to attribute, if you're going to interpret or reference what Senator Blackman said, you have to say what he says. If you can dispute what he said, and you can come with your own. I'm just seeking to delink the two.
Thank you, Mr. President. But I will just repeat what the minister said when he said, and I quote, "We borrow the money up front, sir," and he used the word borrow, the money up front, sir, to build the plant and related infrastructure, and use the savings to pay off the capital loan that we are going to incur from the IDB and GCF in part. So we will have a new loan coming out of this transaction. A new loan in US dollars, sir. So it may be convenient for the government to gloss over that fact and focus only on the potential to repay. But is that good enough when we do not have details of that transaction? Because we can't quantify. No one here can say that the savings will indeed be able to pay off this new loan. The government is now going to tender process next week. We don't know what that is going to result in. We don't know what the tender process is going to look like. We don't know what the bill is. So we can't say with any clarity, sir, that there will not be some additional acts from the citizens of Barbados, because we do not know what it will cost the government to do all this work that was promised. We don't know the exact amount of US dollars that will be borrowed. We don't know the interest and other prepayment terms of this new loan that the minister has said that they will go after coming out of the savings from this. But Mr. President, how long can the government borrow without putting anything in place to earn revenue? If it doesn't, Mr. President, the only other option is taxation to raise revenue. Mr. President, this government asked the citizens of this country, every household and every business in this country, to contribute to fixing the sewage issues that we faced around the period of 2018 and continue to face in some instances. We were asked through our garbage and sewage contribution that households will pay $100.50 per day, of which, Mr. President, 25 cents per day will go directly to rectify sewage issues. Citizens of this country, households in this country, are asking the question now, and I ask on their behalf, how has these funds that have been collected through this contribution been used? We are speaking well over $70 million US since 2018, Mr. President. It is a fair question. It is a fair question because as was required then, we are not, the majority of Barbadians are not connected to the system, is it under 3%? Only 3% is. But everyone was asked to contribute, businesses and households alike, and that has amounted to over $70 million, and the government has not come to the country and said what they have done with this money. But yet they're asking taxpayers to enter into another loan to deal with the issues of the South Coast sewage project. A new loan that will add to the $14.9 billion in debt that this country is already in. That is more than it was in 2018.
Mr. President, sir, I'd like to raise on a point of order.
What's the point of order?
I want to make it clear again for all those listening and for the Honourable Senator in his presentation to ensure that the public understands that this is not a new loan in any way, shape, form, fashion, anyhow, at all. And to say so or impute otherwise is a mistruth. Untruth, sorry.
Please proceed, Senator.
Mr. President, the new loan in the arrangement for the IDB and the Green Climate Fund of about $110 million that was spoken about in the other place will be added to the $14.9 billion in debt that the country has as at September 24th, as per the Central Bank of Barbados. And another debt of $54 million that was made public this morning as well in the media will also be added to that. I must remind the Chamber, Mr. President, that the excess of expenditure over revenue for the period 2024 to 2025 is $943 million. The excess of expenditure over revenue, which means that the government has committed spending $943 million more than it will earn. But we are faced continually with an announcement every other week about a new loan that taxpayers will be asked to repay. Mr. President, as I said previously, the government has been crafty in glossing over some salient issues that reside in this resolution. And while this initiative is something that the country definitely needs, we must not ignore these realities. The $600 million in the resolution is refinancing domestic debt. What is domestic debt made up of? Bonds and treasury bills, which have been taken up by who? Banks, insurance companies, or credit unions. The National Insurance and Social Security Service, and normal individuals like you and I, sir. So while focusing on the words high financing debt, the members of this government feel in some way that they're accomplished, while not showing the real unhidden consequences because of who the debt belongs to, who the government borrowed from, or who placed finances at the hands of the government with an expectation to either give interest income to our pensioners, or have an income for yourself, or even have an income for working class people who are members of the credit union. They have not shared, they have not been clear on the implications that this transaction will have on these groups of persons. And if we are being fair, they can share them. It's not about the poor black man, Senator. It is not about the poor black man. It's about if you are bringing, sorry, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is not about the poor black man. It is about, if you are bringing a program to the country of Barbados, it is fair to tell them these are the pros and these are the downsides or these are the cons. There might be a little pain here, you might be disadvantaged here, but this is for the better. You sell it that way, you don't come up here a rosy picture, there's a climate swap, and there's going to be no implications, and you're not going to pay any more, and hiding the fact that there's another loan around the corner, already signed and sealed. Mr. President, there are great unknowns on what is the financial impact of this transaction. What is the financial impact of this restructuring to individuals that have invested? The credit unions who have the monies of working class people, the National Insurance, Security and Security Service, Social Service. And again, I remind the Chamber that in 2018, the government restructured the debt. They will give you reasons and they will defend why they did that. But the implications of that decision was that pensioners in this country were significantly financially impacted. And while this deal might not impact them, have a significant financial impact, it probably does have a financial impact. And it is fair for the government to put that on the table as well. But again, we have no information on what that likely impact would be. We do not, Mr. President. The National Insurance at that time received a blow of about $1.3 billion, and with the domino effect, persons were asked to work longer until pensionable age. And every January, we are putting more money as workers to the National Insurance Scheme as well. So these are reasonable questions on behalf of the people of Barbados. Senator Drake painted a great picture, in my view, of the importance of this transaction. But I'm saying, let's see the whole picture. But my caution to the government is that while the deal may seem attractive, the government has to manage its reputation with local investors. Because this is a debt restructuring. Again, that will affect local holders of bonds and government securities. So there's likely to be continued loss of confidence in the local market when it comes to investing in government securities if this trend continues, Mr. President. And I am not sold about all of the talk about investor confidence. I shared the last time we were here, Mr. President, that we have not had more foreign direct investment in this country since 2018. Above 2018. And you just got to go back to the Central Bank to see. We have not had no growth in foreign direct investment under this government.
Mr. President, I beg to raise a point of order.
What's the point of order?
Mr. President, to suggest or state that foreign direct investment in this country has not increased, particularly under this administration, is not only untrue, but it is a gross misleading of our great nation and its people. One, the investor confidence in this country has returned in a way unimaginable by the other side. That's one. And two, both in our domestic and external investors, people continue to invest in Barbados in the main way. It is also where you're starting to see increased airlift and people wanting to build hotels and restaurants, including the honorable member. He would know that investor confidence in the retail sector and the hospitality sector has increased. So to come and say to the public that investor confidence and the foreign direct investment has not increased is untrue. It is untrue.
Please continue, Senator Walters. You have 5 minutes more. Yes. 3:35 to 4:05 will be half an hour. 30 minutes as the Nobody Standing Orders.
Mr. President, if anyone, I don't have the time to pull it up. I encourage those following the debate to go to the Central Bank report Q of September 2024 and look for foreign direct investment. And they will see the line item foreign direct investment for every year since 2018 has been below that of 2018. So there is no, people continue to invest, yes, the senator is correct, but I'm saying there is nothing above what was there before. And the numbers show that, Mr. President. But Mr. President, in my few minutes, this project, this capital project, we have to look at implementation, because the record of this government when it comes to implementing projects is not good. It's very, very horrible, actually. 2018, under the last administration, they installed the commencement of the Hyatt Hotel. 6 years on, we have no Hyatt Hotel. In 2018, they saw the project, Sandals project in St. Peter. 6 years on, we have no Sandals, and we have no alternative either. The steel frame homes, years past due, $24 million overrun in housing. Whole project, $60 million in the housing credit fund gone, and very little houses built. Where are the 10,000 homes, Mr. President? Nobody ain't jumping up no points of order, Mr. President. Nobody ain't jumping up points of order, Mr. President. The arrangement between the Co-op Energy Barbados and the government in the agriculture sector is at a stalemate. That is the implementation record of this government. Fisher Fort left out to sea, many without compensation or clear way forward. And the senators in here feel proud to ask us to bring information about people, hardworking people, suffering. Mr. President, the record of this government on implementation, disruption in schools for the first 8 weeks, maintenance programs that the minister said were completed were not, as classes disrupted throughout all of Barbados. In education, still have 11 plus today. I'm wrapping up, Mr. President. Mr. President, the overspend on Cricket World Cup. So we got to look at the implementation. We do not know how much this is going to cost the taxpayers of Barbados. You start at 110 million US. You do not have tenders. You got a record of overruns. $24 million overrun in the steel frame houses. $25 million overrun at Kensington Oval. Mr. President, the record is not good. So all I'm saying, Mr. President, is that just be fair to the taxpayers and the citizens of this country, and in the wrap-up, put everything on the table. Let us know what impact it has on those that hold the bonds, especially the credit unions, the individuals, and the persons that contribute to National Insurance and Social Security Service. Mr. President, I've run out of time, but I'm obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Walters. Thank you. Any other speakers? If there are no other speakers, and that's an enactment to wrap up.
Mr. President, sir, thank you for yielding the floor. And thank you for and thanks to all my colleagues, some informed, some not so informed, nonetheless, for their contributions on the floor to what has turned out, as I predicted, would be a very spirited debate in the chamber. And I start on the point, and of course, we all have our own private lives, Mr. President, and you've gone on record time and time again, that no one can impute motive as to why members may leave the chamber from time to time. But in my own observation, I find it curious that every time members from the Democratic Labour Party take the floor in reply, for the rest of the day, and the record will show, so this is not me making it up, they leave. As I said, you've made it clear, Mr. President, that no one can impute motive. But I just want the public to be aware.
Indeed,
of
Senator
that.
Blackman, I would urge you not to go there. The attendance at, participation in, and matters relating to the Senate, once the Senate has a quorum, that is it. Any matter of drawing attention to numbers is limited to drawing attention to if there's a quorum or not. Presence or absence in the seats of individual members is not the proper subject for debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for, as I said, once again, helping us to some level of clarity. And I will continue to focus in my wrap-up, Mr. President, on helping the public to understand, once again, the purpose of the bill that we have before the House today, the importance of it in the context of where we're going, reminding them, not as much as I did this morning, as to how we got here, but equally where we're going and the benefits for the country. Now, there are a number of questions have come up, and I want to start on the issue of confidence and purported lack of confidence in taking up bonds. Let me go as far as even last year. It was said that there's no appetite at all in the local market for bonds and that Barbadians are not taking up bonds. It was said by the honorable member who, in his reply this morning, took the floor. And I want to invite members and the public to look at the figures in the central bank. July 2023. I go as far back as July 23, last year, in the month of July 2023, where in the Boss Plus bonds, it was $29.2 million. $29.2 million. And thereafter, there was no month that there was a decrease. In other words, it did not go at all, one, below that number. As a matter of fact, every month from July last year until October of 2024, every single month, the take-up was even higher. To the point where in October, which was last month, it moved from 29.2 million in July last year to now a whopping $138 million. Now, I understand that the Democratic Labour Party's track record on economic performance and economic management has been abysmal. I get it. Bajans get it. As a matter of fact, they come to expect it. But to come and mislead the public and try to doctor figures and make people believe that things are no worse off, when as a matter of truth, it is the complete opposite. It is wrong and it must stop. It must stop. And I want to start there. The second thing I want to address is the whole issue of the conditions precedent and a lot of talk of what has been in the resolution and the idea to suggest to the public that the resolution does not make clear what are these conditions and what are the terms and what are the standards that we have to treat to. It would have been better, even though not advised, if the honourable members from the Democratic Labour Party had got to the floor, Mr. President, and admitted that they did not read the document, and so, as a result of not reading the document, they did not see what was in the resolution with respect to these conditions. But to say that they were not put in the conditions is an untruth, and it is wrong. But I understand, in my observation, perhaps one of the members were not prepared, and this morning they said, hold that speech, I'm going to speak it, and therefore, he was at variance with the truth.
I want to raise Senator Walters.
The senators be seen in the House, Mr. President. In my presentation, I focused clearly on the fact, sir, on the fact that the resolution has called on savings to service a new arrangement. And I'm saying the details of the new arrangement is not forthcoming, so it cannot be measured if these savings will, in fact, be able to service the new arrangement.
Indeed. Senator Blackburn, please continue.
Mr. President, I understand what is happening here. You have a situation where the honourable member who just rose to his feet and the honourable member who replied to my presentation this morning are trying to every week figure out who is going to reply to the leader of government business or whoever leads the debate, and that internal confusion is causing them, because I was not making reference to what the honourable member was saying. I'm talking about who replied to me this morning, and I was very specific. That notwithstanding, I will continue. And perhaps it might be advised if the honourable member on his side decides who is the leader of opposition business in the Senate and not come in here and try to fight it out in the public. It is not a good look. It is not a good look. It is not a good look. Come to the public with a united front and not this division that the DLP is portraying to the public. It is not good. You ain't have to fend for yourself and you gone.
You have the floor. Please continue, Senator Blackburn. Do not be distracted.
Mr. President, I would look at you and not Senator Rogers because he has me laughing all the time. But seriously, Mr. President, sir, on the issues of the policy conditions precedent in the guarantee, I want to walk the public through in my rapport on a few things, and it's here in the resolution, not in my presentation. It's in the resolution for the public to have. It's here. It's here, and I encourage members to read it. 1, macroeconomic sustainability. And if I go in a bit more detail, the maintenance of an appropriate macroeconomic policy framework, congruent with the programme's objectives and in accordance with the provisions of the letter dated 13 June 2024, and it says, of course, describing the county guarantor's commitment in relation to the programme. In other words, macroeconomic stability must be part of the process. Now, I can understand why there is, or perhaps there was that fear. Because why? The honourable member, Senator Worrell, was part of an administration where macroeconomic stability was never in the same sentence of his administration. But since 2018, the public has decided that the Barbados Labour Party administration, a party of fiscal prudence and a track record of fiscal prudence post-independence, leads the affairs of this nation. And therefore, when we signed on to this, and we bring it before the House, we have the track record, not just from 2018, but post-independence as an administration, now, and as a party that understands the importance of fiscal prudence and proper macroeconomic sustainability. We have the track record. It is why the investor confidence has come back. It is why we have surpassed every measure and benchmarks as outlined by all different indicators around the world. Secondly, strengthening the enabling environment for resilient investments. And we go and we see enhancing the strategy and governance to promote climate resilient investments. And in particular, Cabinet approval of the Barbados 2035 High-Level Investment Plan for Prosperity and Resilience, directed to 1, setting up a common framework, Mr. President, identifying investment in adaptation and resiliency, and 2, identifying priority investments and related resilience objectives. But I go a little further. Cabinet approval of establishment of a project steering committee to meet transparency requirements of the Paris Agreement, including a clear mandate of the PSC and the invitation, of course, for its first meeting, including invitees of the Bureau of Gender Affairs as an observer. And I go on. Strengthening the water and sanitation sector's regulatory and strategic framework to promote resilient investments. And why is this so important? As I said, it's a long list, but it's all here. And the reason why I'm saying it's here, and not just in my presentation this morning, because 1, it showed that there was no reading of the document, particularly in its entirety, but 2, to make the suggestion that we brought something to this honorable chamber that was not in the document is not only misleading, but to give it an impression also beyond Parliament that the country is not handling the affairs correct. And that's not true. It is there. And as I said, what you need to do, and what I encourage members to do, is to read the documents. Read the documents. Senator Boyce, you know sometimes you're handed the brief minutes before you have to go into court. And you still have to represent the interests of your client. Senator Nichols can attest to the same. It is part and parcel of the nature of governance. We are in the business of reading, and high volumes of work at that, Mr. President, sir. Now, when I go on and I look at the actual issue of the Water Authority, and I commend Senator Doctor, and I have to now get used to it and roll it off my tongue, Senator Doctor, for treating a number of issues relative to the Water Authority. But I also want to speak on a number of the salient bits and points, particularly as we look at the Water Authority Strategic Plan, 2025-2029, Mr. President. Because 1, the plan recognizes the complexity really that surrounds the challenges facing the Water Authority. Now, it is unfortunate that each time we have to go forward and take the debates forward and take the strategic planning of where we're going forward, that we have to remind the country of where we started. Believe you me, everybody on this side would prefer if we roll out our plans, not having to remind not only the country but ourselves where our starting point was. But that starting point, we started below zero. It's not even to say we started at zero. We were starting at a minus, a deficit. And therefore we had to climb to zero. Imagine there's a number line, and now move ahead and climb up. So ordinarily, perhaps if we were at zero, we might have now been at 20. But we are now at 5 because we had to now come from minus 20. It is a fact. And that minus 20 was May 2018. Then you had COVID. But notwithstanding COVID, we were still able to stabilize this country. Investment still came. And you had a situation where people continued to do well with Barbados. Now, with respect to the water, as I said, no, I don't worry, come in. It also recognizes that with the climate crisis being a present factor, the framework of how we treat the issue of water is critical. Because why? Particularly in the context of a natural disaster, Mr. President, how we respond, our ability to ensure that our people have access to running water over time, our ability for our population to have access to water, even if it's not running also, but to meet their basic needs in the context of a crisis is going to be key. So we have to build out, because the reality is Barbados is on the front line of the climate crisis. And the Water Authority did not receive the investments, and that's why I made the point this morning, Mr. President, sir, that you had the priorities of a a nation treating to the issue of sanitation neglected, but instead, millions of dollars were spent in a building that brought no utility to the public of Barbados. And as a government now, we have the obligation to ensure that our people and our sector is put on a firm footing for the long term. And I know Senator Walters agrees with me. I know he agrees with me. He agrees with me 100%. Let me come to you, Mr. President, on the next point, within the context of the strategic plan. When we look, therefore, at some of the activities, development of a prioritized infrastructure, renewal plan for both water and with the wastewater sectors, which of course is funded based on the Barbados Plan for Investment and Prosperity and Resilience. The development also of an execution of strategic maintenance replacement program. All of these things that should have been done, this administration is now doing, notwithstanding our fiscal constraints, notwithstanding the geopolitical realities, but we're doing so in a circumstance where there is a commitment to face it and fix it, as a former leader once said. The completion of the wastewater investment plan to expand sanitation coverage in line with commitments under the Debt for Climate Transaction and related water and resilient commitments. The erection of decentralized sewage collection and treatment systems in Zone A areas. The point is this: as we build out, one, to the treatment of the facility to ensure that the southern part of our nation has a plant that is fit for purpose, that is one. And two, building out our capacity for water, also the non-revenue water, because of course we have to ensure that as pipes burst, we have the capacity to fix them, because you don't want to have a set of leakage that takes away from water that ordinarily is in use in a country that is already water scarce. So we're looking at an overall strategy in the long term to put the sector on an equal footing. And what is beautiful about this bill, and I want to now use this time to say this resolution, sorry, thank you, is that, as I said this morning, there is no new debt that this country is going to face as a result of this. And I want to clear up something, because the honorable member who, in his reply, said this is akin to a mortgage refinance. That is not true. Because why? When you refinance a mortgage on a house, you're not getting another house in that context. In this regard here, you, for example, you can refinance and you spread out the length of your loan on the same property. In this regard, what we are doing is that we are getting a new plant, completely new, building a new, upgrading the facility, and there is no increase of the debt whatsoever. Otherwise, if we don't do it like this, we would have had to still continue to pay off the loan. But yet, now, we're getting an upgraded facility in circumstances where otherwise we'd have to get a pot of money. Where would we get it from? I suspect, given the history of the Democratic Labour Party, they would increase tax. But we are not doing that to the public of Barbados. And therefore, this facility and this strategy, as endorsed by our international partners, is one that we must be proud of. There comes a time when you have to put parties in politics aside and look for the best, for what's best for the country. Now, with respect to the issue of debt, and this will be my final intervention, Mr. President. As I started, I said the discussion on debt continues to be one that is, for political purposes, by many, oftentimes treated as a political football, volleyball, whatever you choose. But the facts are the facts. Prior to 2018, and in particular May 2018, there was borrowing in increasingly large numbers. The Democratic Labour Party, Mr. President, doubled the debt that they, let me go through this, huh? They doubled the debt from 2008, 10 years, to $12 billion. They thought they came up only at $6 billion. What did we as a country have to see or benefit from? From an increased debt that was doubled in 10 years, garbage trucks were not bought, buses were not bought, QEH times were not decreased, no accident and emergency was put there that would have helped us in the future pandemic, which we manifested, unfortunately, in 2020. University students could not get access to education at Cave Hill on UWI, as they were, based on the cost that they then had to pay. What did they do and show with that increase of the debt? Twice the number. So that is the starting point that the honourable member for that side should treat to. Nothing to show, Mr. President, nothing. In French, they say rien. In Spanish, they say nada. And no, I don't know Chinese. The point I'm making is this: those who come. I get very emotional about this, you see, because, as I said, those who come to equity must come with clean hands. And those in public life have an obligation to understand that you cannot come and lecture a people. This is not just the Labour Party, no. You cannot come and lecture a nation on economic governance when you had 10 years to show that you could do a good job and you failed abysmally. Failed. If their governance model of 2008 to 2018 was any examination to get them into any institution around the world, you would see golden bars put around them, no DLP allowed. It would be akin to how they treated members of their party recently. You are not allowed in here. Imagine, Mr. President, you have people talking about governance and good governance and leadership and inspiration and the people of Barbados, but yet you can, in one breath, say God, and then in the next breath, tell people you can't come into church on a Sunday. It is wrong. It is hypocritical. Those who come to equity must come with clean hands. And I understand that the honourable member is now left to face all of this music on his own, fine. But I would give a bit of wisdom before I take my seat, Mr. President. Public life demands of us, particularly as young politicians, in my own personal experience, to be truthful with the people. Admit that economic management is always better off under the Labour Party. Let's start there, the Barbados Labour Party. Let us admit and agree to and settle this debate once and forever, and I know that the silence is agreement in this context, Mr. President, that economic mismanagement has significant implications. It's not just about pointing fingers, you did this, you did that. No. These things have long implications long after the actors have gone and have been voted out. And people now have to come and roll up their sleeves and put their hand in the proverbial muck and spend time and loans that they're talking about to fix the wrongs that they should have done. This is where we are as a country. We are taking these loans to build the capacity of this nation. We're not taking these loans to line anybody's pocket or to do things that would cause you to end up in a penitentiary in foreign lands. No. This is to build the capacity. And for a small nation to be able to work with the banking sector and the international community, the multilateral development banks, to be able to have this is beyond commendable. And it should be a proud moment for all of us. Government, opposition, independents, everybody. This is where we need to rise to. And therefore, Mr. President, I want to thank everybody for their contribution and for us to now move to the next stage of development. Barbados is now a country that is now akin to leadership of the climate crisis and fighting the climate crisis and finding innovative ways to respond to these major challenges, notwithstanding our limited fiscal space as a smaller and developing state. as Dr. Drakes would have indicated. We have a proud legacy to uphold. And therefore, Mr. President, with those words, I want to thank you and beg that this be now read a second, no, sorry, resolution will be now passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blackman. The question is that this resolution be now passed. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Resolution is accordingly passed. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I beg to move to suspend the adjournment of this sitting of the Senate. Sine die.
The question is that the Senate be now adjourned sine die. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The Senate is therefore adjourned sine die.